Heizou is like that meme where it's like,
I'm not like other girls.
but in a good way if you know how that 9-second clip ends. Yeah, he's a melee catalyst, which is a first in Genshin Impact, but there's even more in his kit that really sets him apart from any other catalyst we've had, and so far, he's been a real breath of fresh air without doing anything game-breaking. As a 4-star character, I didn't expect him to be game-breaking or anything, but I can definitely say he has a spot in several different teams and is not a character you should overlook. As always, this guide will cover everything you need to know about Heizou, from his best artifacts and weapons to general playstyle and team compositions. Without further ado, let's get this guide rolling. Since Heizou is a new character, let me take a little bit of time to explain the most important parts of his kit. First up, let's talk about his elemental skill, which is arguably his strongest aspect because of its pretty high damage multipliers. You probably know that Heizou's skill can charge up to do more damage, but what you might not know is that his first Ascension talent can actually also grant Declension Stacks to his skill by triggering swirl reactions. Declension Stacks are just the official name for the charges that can be added to Heizou's elemental skill to deal more damage. This is super important because holding his skill takes a lot of time to charge up, and for the most part it's not worth holding. Instead, we want to focus on getting our skill stacks by triggering multiple swirl reactions, which brings us to my next tip. One thing that separates Heizou from all other Catalyst characters is his charge attack. Other Catalysts have charge attacks that cost 50 stamina, but Heizou's only costs 25 stamina. This is a huge positive for Heizou because it allows him to use charge attacks with a little more freedom. And if you're knowledgeable about theory crafting, you'll know that this is a much bigger deal than it looks on paper, because normal attacks and charge attacks share different internal cooldowns. If you're not into theory crafting, basically what I'm trying to hint at is that a lower stamina cost will give Heizou the freedom to weave in charge attacks between his normal attacks. This will apply more animo onto the enemy, trigger more swirl reactions, and ultimately allow Heizou to gain Declension Stacks much quicker than normal. For other Catalyst characters, spamming out charge attacks is oftentimes too costly on your stamina bar. On the other hand, if you continuously normal attack, you'll notice that you only apply animo to swirl every 3 hits or every 2.5 seconds. This is what theory crafters call the 3-hit rule and the time rule respectively. And this is precisely why having a lower stamina cost on Heizou's charge attack really matters. Beyond his Declension Stacks, Heizou is pretty straightforward. His overall playstyle is an on-field driver for off-field damage dealers like Yelan, Xingqiu, Beidou, Fischl, and the list goes on. His second Ascension talent supports this playstyle by granting 80 Elemental Mastery to the party after triggering a swirl reaction excluding himself. He can also take a quick swap style with fairly short cooldowns on his skill and burst, as well as a low energy requirement. A lot of other catalysts also have high energy cost bursts, which is just another reason why Heizou is a little bit unique. He is just the second catalyst character with a 40 energy cost burst, with Ningguang being the first. One thing to note about his burst is that although it does have a grouping mechanic, it's pretty weak even with the upgrade from C2. And aside from C2, the rest of Heizou's constellations simply just bolster his personal damage, making him a lot more viable as a pure animo DPS the more constellations that you get your hands on. As a result, at lower constellations you can also get a lot of value out of a pure elemental mastery build. Heizou's artifacts are pretty easy. I mean, seriously, if you're an animo character that is not named Xiao, pretty much the only artifact set that anyone is ever going to recommend to you is the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer. Heizou does a lot of animo damage. Heizou's kit wants him to trigger a lot of swirl reactions. Heizou's kit also wants him to spend a little bit of time on the field. These are all perfect conditions for the 4-set Viridescent Veneerer, since remember, the elemental res can only occur if your character is on the field at the time of the swirl reaction. If you're a beginner below AR45, then like Kazuha, the 4-set instructor is great for buffing your team before you have access to 5-star Viridescent pieces. If you want personal damage, since Heizou is a catalyst character that abuses charge attacks, the 4-set Wanderer's Troop is also a slept-on option for beginners. As for artifact stats, Heizou has 2 routes that you can take, the full EM build or the pure animo damage build. Remember, as I mentioned before, all of Heizou's constellations bolster his personal damage, so the more constellations you have, the more recommended the pure animo build becomes. The full EM build takes triple EM in the Sands Goblet and Circlet with animo damage bonus as a replacement in the Goblet slot. Substat focus for this build is really just elemental mastery first, then every other offensive stat like energy recharge, attack percent, or crit. The pure Anemo damage build takes the standard attack percent in the sands, Anemo damage bonus in the goblet, and crit rate or crit damage in the circlet. Substat focus should be crit first, then attack percent, elemental mastery, and energy recharge afterwards. Some pretty simple stuff for artifacts. Weapons are where people actually have the most trouble deciding on what to run for Heizou because there are a ton of options that you can run depending on your team and personal artifact build. As such, for each weapon that I list, I'll do my best to note whether or not the weapon is meant for a crit build, EM build, or both. One of the most consistent options in testing tends to be Skyward Atlas. This catalyst gives a huge boost to attack and even a little bit of elemental damage bonus, making it a great option for either EM or crit builds. Another huge attack booster is Memory of Dust as a replacement for Skyward Atlas, but unlike Skyward, it doesn't provide nearly as much consistency with its passive. The two other catalysts that are about the same level as Skyward Atlas are Kagura's Verity and the Widsith. It doesn't matter whether or not you have crit or EM with these weapons. Even though their crit damage stats may lean towards a crit build, their passives are super consistent with Heizou's kit and give him a huge damage boost regardless of your build. After Kagura's Verity and the Widsith, Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds is the ultimate weapon to run on a crit-focused Heizou if you don't know what to run. You can never go wrong with elemental damage bonus through the passive, as well as a ton of crit rate to ease up your artifact farming. If you have a high refinement Sacrificial Fragment, Solar Pearl, or Mappa Mare, they can even surpass Lost Prayer, but if any of these weapons are at R1, they do fall a little bit behind. Sacrificial Fragments is actually really good, especially in AoE situations, but it's the ultimate feast or famine weapon with refinements. If you're looking for more consistency, Solar Pearl is a decent budget option for $10, and Mappa Mare is completely free. Outside of these main options, we do have a couple more free-to-play weapons that I'd like to mention. First, we have Hakushin Ring. Even though it heavily nerfs Heizou's personal damage, it's a fantastic free-to-play support option for electro-charged teams. If you like support but don't really want to play Heizou in a Taser team, the Thrilling Tales of Dragon Slayers can also provide similar levels of utility. And last but not least, R5 Dodoko Tails is a 1.6 version exclusive weapon that doesn't really see a lot of use. It's not even that great on Heizou, but if you have no one else to use it on, Heizou can make decent use of the passive. And last but not least, we've come to Heizou's teams. There are many different teams that are being tested right now, but for today, I'm going to discuss the 3 different teams that are the most popular and consistent right off the bat. First, it should be no surprise that Heizou's best team is a Taser team by a long shot. His ability to drive off-field supports with the 4-cent Viridescent Veneer screams Electro-Charge to pretty much all players. Aside from Heizou, a Taser team will also include 2 Electro characters and an off-field Hydro application. With Heizou as the driver, your best off-field characters are going to be Xingqiu, Yelan, or Kokomi. If you choose Yelan, one of your Electro characters will have to be Kuki Shinobu if you want heals, otherwise your 2 Electro characters can be any combination of Raiden Shogun, Fischl, Beidou, and Yai Miko. Regardless of which build you have, Taser is Heizou's strongest team, but in particular, the EM build shines with a Taser team, especially with a weapon like Hakushin Ring. The second team I want to talk about is a Freeze team. Normally, a Freeze team will have an on-field cryo DPS like Ayaka or Ganyu, but Heizou can actually flip that narrative around and support some off-field cryo damage dealers. A Heizou-driven Freeze team is a lot more free-to-play friendly, where the cryo DPS becomes Rosaria or Kaya, and the usual cryo support and Hydro application in the 3rd and 4th team slots. Your Hydro support will be Xingqiu, Yelan, or Kokomi again, while your cryo support will be Diona if you still need healing, or Rosaria, Kaya, Shenhe, and even C2 Chongyun. The premise of this team is to have Heizou constantly provide the rest shred from the 4-set Viridescent to your off-field elemental bursts, such as Rosaria's Lance and Kaya's Icicles. Whether or not you build EM or crit on Heizou for this team is completely up to you, since we'll be both swirling a ton of elements and dealing a lot of Anemo damage. The third and final team I'd like to discuss is Heizou in a classic variant of the national team. This team consists of Heizou, Xingqiu, Xiangling, and Bennett. Is Heizou a better version of Sucrose in this national team? Most likely not, but he definitely isn't bad either. Even though his elemental mastery buff is child's play compared to Sucrose, he does provide a little bit of everything from his own Anemo damage to resistance shred and a small elemental mastery buff as well. The national team has always been consistent for many players, and Heizou happens to fit into one of the 4-star only variants, which is perfect for free-to-play players and spenders alike. To wrap up the video, let me know your thoughts on Heizou down in the comment section below. I'd love to read what you have for his build and your thoughts on him so far. But besides that, if you enjoyed this guide or thought it was useful, be sure to support both the video and the channel. You can follow me on Twitch, join my Discord, sub to the YouTube channel, or whatever people do nowadays. Other than that, it's the same as always. I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.